That's brilliant. So welcome everyone to Cacao. I'm Rebecca Shaman, and I've been working with Cacao in ceremony for the last 5 years. I have a deep affinity with Cacao. I love her very much. And I'd like to just start this webinar with a story, a creation myth story about Cacao. This comes from South America, from Peru, and as most of you will know, my plant medicine training started in Peru when I found my way, being called by a shaman, to the Amazon jungle, where I trained in ayahuasca. She was my teacher plant and set me on the path of plant medicines, working with them ceremonially to help awaken consciousness and to reconnect us back to nature. So this is a South American myth around cacao. Kuno, the god of storms, destroyed a village with torrential rain and hail because he was angry at the people for having set fire to the jungle to clear land for their crops. After the storm, the people found a cacao tree. This, they say, is how cacao came into cultivation. Cacao showed these people how to live in harmony with the jungle. And cacao is part of many creation myths. Certainly in South and Central America, it's essential to our heritage as humans and has been around for many thousands of years. And the general theme of these creation myths is when humans have reached a place and a state of consciousness where they're starting to destroy nature, when they're starting to separate from nature, where they're starting to utilize nature as a commodity, cacao comes in to save the day and reconnect people back to nature and restore harmony within nature. So it's no surprise to me that cacao is reconnecting with us in a different way. She's known in her more processed form as a confectionery, as chocolate, but all chocolate is made from the cacao bean. And it's no coincidence that cacao is here to harmonize and rebalance us, because cacao has an incredible amount of properties of psychological and health properties that help us feel better and reconnect us back in. So cacao is comes from the ancient, it's an ancient word, probably from the Olmec people, and it was incredibly important plant medicine at the time. It was so valuable, it was used as currency. And Montezuma, the emperor of Tenochtitlan, of the Aztec emperor, his treasure vaults were filled with cacao beans, and rather than with gold. Cacao was an incredibly valuable bean at the time and was used for currency, for goods and services, to pay wages, and it was often bartered for. One ripe avocado would be one cacao bean, and one avocado picked off the tree would cost 3 cacao beans, and you would barter your chickens for cacao beans as well. So cacao has always been around and has been always considered a very valuable plant medicine. But what is cacao? Well, cacao is a superfood, or can be considered a superfood. Because it contains so many health and well-being benefits. It's known mostly at the moment as it stands now. We know her mostly as chocolate, where it's been heated up at quite high temperatures and then had lots of things added to it. But pure liqueur, pure cacao is made straight from the cacao bean. So cacao grows on trees in pods, and these trees produce pods all year round, and they really do sprout. It's really abundant, and cacao is massively abundant. And they sprout all over the tree. They sprout on the trunk. They sprout on the branches. And within these pods, the beans are nurtured and grown around this hard shell. And once it comes to fruition, you cut out open the shell, and it's surrounded by a white pith, and is put into baskets underneath the tree, wooden baskets, and it needs to be stirred depending on the variety of cacao, either 3 times a day for 5 days or for 7 days, depending on the variety. Once it's stirred 3 times a day and it's left out under the shade of the tree and in the sun, it ferments the beans, which draws out the flavor of them, and then they are lightly cleaned, lightly roasted, and then the shell is taken off. Or if they're raw, they're not lightly roasted, and then you just take off the shell, crack open the shell, and the bean is there to eat. It's a fantastic, a delicious substitute for coffee, and it has a lot of components like coffee, but it has so much more. So what is his health and well-being benefits? Well, it has gained popularity and has much more mainstream attention because people are realizing the amazing benefits that it contains. It is it's one of the highest ranking foods as a source of antioxidants on the ORAC scale. It has more antioxidants, 40 times more, than blueberries. Raw cacao is used to produce cacao products that are high in flavonoids and antioxidants. And this is where it's really powerful, because these antioxidants prevent heart disease, strokes, and cancer. But one of its main health properties is that it's one of the highest foods in magnesium, and we really suffer a lot in the magnesium deficiency. Humans do. Magnesium fights acid buildup. It neutralizes toxins and reduces pain, and builds strong bones and teeth. So it really helps with, and also a lack of magnesium can also lead to feeling depressed and low energy. So cacao has a super boosting therapeutic effect with its magnesium. It also contains high amounts of minerals such as iron and chromium, zinc and copper, which all contributes to a balanced, healthy system. In fact, cacao has over 300 compounds that we know of, which also help to positively alter our mood. And this is where cacao comes into her own as a plant medicine to shift consciousness, because she specifically contains serotonin, or she helps release the molecules of the serotonin and dopamine chemicals into the brain naturally. So SSRIs, or antidepressants, chemically release serotonin into the brain, but cacao naturally does it. So it's almost like a natural antidepressant. It also boosts our natural production of serotonin. So when we drink it, we actually get a big boost of serotonin, increasing our mood and our ability to calm any stress and anxiety that we might be feeling. It also plays a key role in the dopamine production, and dopamine is aligned and helps us with our alertness, our learning, our creativity, our attention, our concentration levels, but more interestingly, our satisfaction of life. So when we have high in dopamine, we feel a sense of satisfaction, a sense of gratitude, and a sense of well-being with our lives. So it naturally enables us to feel more of that when we take cacao. And finally, anandamide contains anandamide, which is considered the bliss molecule, and anandamide inducing feelings of well-being and states of heightened happiness. And anandamide is a cannabinoid, and we have an endocannabinoid system, and there's 2 plant medicines that feed this endocannabinoid system. And the first one is cannabis, and cannabis feeds this endocannabinoid system, and the other one is cacao. And both of these plant medicines release anandamide that gives us a real good state of heightened happiness, which is why when we take cannabis, we get this idea of feeling high. It also improves memory motivation, gives us higher thought understandings, and actually helps us with our movement and our connection. It also, on top of all of that, contains phenethylamine, which is PEA, which we naturally produce in our bodies when we fall in love. So when we take cacao, we have this sense of falling in love, which is why so many, it has almost like an addictive quality, because that PEA, when we don't have it, when we feel lonely and isolated and rejected, it really brings out that feeling of feeling back in love again. And so that's why many people seem a little bit, they become addicted to it, because it has such a good feeling for ourselves. So cacao, how I got into cacao, or why cacao has called me, was really through ayahuasca. I completed my apprenticeship after 14 years with ayahuasca. And as I ended my last ceremony, and as the sun rose, I heard this very strong message coming from the medicine saying, now it's time to bring cacao back to the West, and you need to go and find the cacao shaman and bring your understanding of plant medicines with cacao and start offering it in the West where it's really needed. And didn't know anything about cacao, and I didn't know anything about any cacao shaman. So, and I was meant to fly home 2 days later. So I turned to my partner and I basically said, look, I'm not coming back to England. I'm on a hunt for a cacao shaman, and I'm looking to find cacao, and I'm going to bring it back and start doing ceremony there. It was a really strong calling. And 3 days later, I was invited to a festival called Cosmic Convergence in Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. And on the festival lineup was a cacao shaman who lives on Lake Atitlan, who was offering a cacao ceremony. And so I went and I did the cacao ceremony, and it was very powerful. And then I went to the cacao shaman and I stayed with him for 2 weeks, and I ingested cacao and I learned how to listen to cacao. And she told me that she's a very simple plant medicine in that you can work with her in any way you want. So she doesn't have any really strong protocols connected to her, unlike iboga or ayahuasca or peyote. They all have very strong rules and protocols that need to be kept in order to maintain the purity of the plant medicine and to be able to utilize the plant medicine to the best of her ability. But cacao is much more versatile. And with cacao, you can work with her anyway. And cacao said to me, I want you to bring me back to the West and work with me in a ceremonial way where you guide people to me and I can help them find their way through their difficulties. And so I gave away all my possessions and I filled my rucksack with 22 pounds of cacao. And I left Guatemala and headed back to England. I had to run through customs in Mexico because the red light went off, and I had this cacao goddess with me. So I ran through and finally got to England with 22 pounds of cacao in my rucksack. And it started to just sit staring at me every day in the corner of my room. And I knew I had to just jump in and start offering cacao. And did my first ceremony on February the 14th of 2013. And I was blown away from the very first time I did it, just how powerful cacao is as a ceremonial plant medicine. It is such a heart-centered anchor, and this is because of its amazing health properties and because of the serotonin and dopamine and anandamide that it works with. It can really help us really open our hearts and really get in tune with the pain and the wounds that we're holding, to really release some of the old energies and echoes that hold on to us. And so what I found in my 5 years of working with cacao is that we can do a lot of the mental and emotional clearing and physical clearing. But the real deep spiritual conscious clearing is very difficult to reach. And it's almost like cacao can get to that deep consciousness, that deep spiritual healing, and really shine her light and really clear out those echoes, those vibrations, those traumas that really hold us back from moving forward, and ultimately really hold us back from loving ourselves. Cacao is a really powerful medicine to help us understand ourselves and love ourselves. And by loving ourselves, it's really by accepting what's happened in our lives, all the difficulties and challenges that have led us to who we have become, and letting go of all the perpetrators and aggressors and people that have created our stories for us. So cacao is a massively empowering plant medicine to go deep in and really find that self-love, really find that self-respect, and really find that self-worth. And during my time working with cacao, I have really experienced some extraordinary healings and breakthroughs, really huge energy releases and life transformations. And I really have seen people actually release old traumas that they've tried everything to release and they haven't been able to, and they take cacao and it just flows out of them. Over a period of time also, I have found that cacao is a massive is a brilliant relaxer, and it really increases the tolerance levels as well. So the stress is really diminished, and also the anxiety is diminished. When we drink cacao on a regular basis, it really reduces the anxiety. Personally, I feel much happier and younger, more vibrant and energized. But I no longer really get those depressive dips that I used to. And it's depressive dips. It's very hard not to be depressed right now on the planet. There's really some dark stuff happening, things well out of our control, or things that we're being bombarded from all sides. And it seems to be getting very, very, very scary on the planet. I think it has always been scary, but very recently it seems to have becoming much, much darker. And cacao can really help moderate those deep feelings of depression and those depressive dips, because it releases the serotonin and the dopamine and the anandamide into the brain, so you feel calmer and more peaceful. And when you feel like that, you feel more connected in with life, more connected in with the world, with nature. So she really is a harmonizing plant medicine. And it's no surprise that the old ancient Peruvian Amazonian myth of cacao coming in to harmonize the tribes and harmonize nature. And I really feel that why is cacao is coming back as a sacred ceremonial plant to be taken in that way, to really harmonize us, because when we're more in harmony with ourselves, in harmony with life, we can think more clearly. And when we think more clearly, we can come up with solutions to the challenges that we are facing, both on a personal level, but also as a collective level. So cacao really has a really important role to play at this time, to really releasing and really harmonizing some of the deep stress and anxiety and fear that people are experiencing right now. But what I love about cacao, even more than that, is that when you drink cacao, you are still fully conscious. So you are still very aware of where you are, what you're doing, who you are, and what's happening. So you never lose a sense of self, unlike with other master plant medicines, unlike ayahuasca and iboga and peyote. They can take you very deep and often to quite scary places within yourself that maybe you're not ready to. But Cacao never takes you to those places. She is so loving and gentle and peaceful that all her medicine does is help you naturally and very gently release that which is not serving you. And by doing that, it means that we can actually change the things that in our lives that need tweaking much more easily. So what I found is that with the more powerful, and I say more strong plant medicines like ayahuasca or iboga, you can often come back from these journeys and feel very confused and even go backwards and have a bit of a wobble after you've drunk these medicines. And it can take a long time for these medicines to bring you clarity and to understand what's going on. But cacao works very, very subtly. So she gives you the little tweaks that you need to make in your life in order to be more in harmony with yourself and the world. So she's a much more practical plant medicine. And when you come to ceremony, she will guide you in what you need to do in your journey. So when I work with cacao, and like I mentioned, everyone works with cacao differently. This is how I work with her as a plant medicine shaman to shift consciousness. I take you on a journey to meet the cacao goddess, the cacao spirit. And as a plant medicine shaman, I believe that every plant has a consciousness and a medicine and attached to it, every plant. And we can journey with all plant medicines. And all plant medicines have a wisdom and a message to give to us. And it's whether we can hear that wisdom and that messages that's coming through. So what I do is then in the silence, I take people to meet the cacao spirit, and then the cacao spirit communes personally with you, and so that you can get your own messages directly from her. So it's a real deep connection with plant consciousness, with plant medicine, in a very safe, secure and gentle way. So I really call cacao like the gateway ceremonial medicine. For those of you who are too afraid to take cacao, to take ayahuasca, or to take any of the harder plant medicines, but you're feeling a calling to sit in ceremony and to dive deep within yourself and to hear your wisdom and to connect with the plant medicines, cacao is a really, really important and powerful plant medicine for that. She's a brilliant gateway medicine. She works directly on the heart. She is a heart-opening medicine. So she clears emotional blocks. She enables us to let go of past relationships. She helps us to understand ourselves better, why we do what we do, what stories do we tell ourselves that keep us stuck. She helps us connect with our creativity. She shows us the way forward when we're feeling stuck or we don't know which way to move forward or we have a big challenge ahead of us. She gives us advice and suggestions and confidence to move forward and really follow our hearts. She helps with team building. Cacao, I call my ceremonies, but cacao is really meant to be taken with a lot of people, like ayahuasca and other ceremonies are really better with smaller groups so that people can go really deep. But with cacao, it's almost like the more the people, the stronger the bond that everyone feels. So it's a real deep heart-opening bond. And she helps us to get in tune with our hearts, what our hearts are saying, gets in tune with our intuition. She helps us listen to that small inner voice inside that we find very difficult to hear in the noise of the mind. So cacao is a brilliant medicine for really hearing what your intuition is saying to you, what your heart is saying to you, by opening up that heart space and allowing ourselves to hear those messages that are coming through. So she's a really beautiful medicine. How she's drunk, we drink medicine in ceremony, so she's drunk. It's 42 grams of cacao for a shamanic dose to go on a shamanic ceremonial journey with 250 milliliters of water. So anyone can make up the cacao and drink the cacao. But as I said, in nature, cacao, nature shows you how much you can have of something. For example, an ayahuasca vine takes 5 to 8 years to grow. Therefore, so therefore, you shouldn't be taking ayahuasca a lot. It's a medicine that should be taken quite rarely, really, for a deep sickness that you have. But cacao explodes on the trees. I mean, you can have acres of cacao, hectares of cacao. So cacao is a medicine that you can take regularly. You can take it daily. I take cacao most days in a smoothie. And then I obviously do cacao ceremonies where I also drink it with the participants of the ceremony. And I do find that when I drink the cacao, it really immediately goes to work. You immediately feel this rush of relaxation and this really deep sense of calm, and it's almost like the heart opens. But when I put it, when I do it ceremonially, it really opens the heart. But when I take it every day in smoothie, this is really to get the magnesium into my system and to give me energy. It really is a fantastic energizer. It does contain caffeine, so it has that energizer. But unlike coffee, that kind of takes you up and spikes you and then drops you down into the deep depths of exhaustion, cacao has a slower metabolism. So basically, you're utilizing cacao the whole day. I also find when I drink cacao, I'm much more tolerant, I'm much more relaxed, and I'm much more able to flow and harmonize with what's going on around me without feeling too distressed or depressed or upset by what's going on externally around me. And living in London, there's a lot of triggers. So cacao is a brilliant plant medicine for urbanites, for people living in the urban jungle, especially people who suffer from stress and anxiety and drink coffee. Because one thing I have found is I stopped drinking coffee for 7 months and I found my anxiety went down quite dramatically. And I realized that the coffee was triggering some of the anxiety response. And I almost got used to a certain level of anxiety. And when I stopped coffee, I realized that actually I was almost making myself more anxious by drinking coffee, and by swapping it with cacao, I felt a lot more tolerant and peaceful and harmonized. So it really is a brilliant substitute for coffee. I know people who take it every morning make a little cacao shot of 25 or 30 grams, and that's how they like to do it. Cacao is very versatile, so you can add many things to it. You can add cinnamon or nutmeg or nuts and so many different things. She's so versatile, and she really works well with everything and really gives you that amazing boost of energy and boost of connection. So at this point, I just want to ask if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask me about cacao and about ceremony and about ceremonial cacao. And if you do, please just put it into the message box underneath there, and I will answer the questions. So there are 3 varieties of cacao. There's Criollo, there's Forastero, and there's Trinitero. And cacao can only grow 20 degrees around the equator. It cannot grow outside of the equator, so we cannot grow cacao here in the UK. It is it's too far north of the hemisphere. Only can be grown 20 degrees around the equator. But it really likes jungle environments because it needs to be planted around shade and around other trees that create the midges that pollinate the cacao flowers that help to create the pods. So cacao likes to be in a very lush, fertile, shady environment where other trees are growing to enable the midges to come and help to pollinate. And it's a very lush, and you can grow a lot of it in the jungle. It grows quite regularly and quite well there, and it grows all over the Caribbean. It grows anywhere where it's really hot and humid, but has really good shade and really lushy soil. But ceremonial grade cacao is different to, I would say, normal grade cacao. And ceremonial grade has to be fair trade. It has to be made and processed in a way where there's a deep respect for the plant and the plant consciousness. For me, that's what makes it ceremonial. If it's made, or if it's processed, if it's produced for profit, if the farmers and the growers and the processors aren't getting paid a fair wage, if child labour is being used for cacao for profit, if shortcuts are being taken on the processing, then it can't be used as ceremonial cacao. Even if it's organic and raw, if it hasn't had, if the energy behind the processing and the growing and the producing of the cacao isn't coming with a deep respect for the plant medicine, it cannot be used or for ceremony, or certainly to go deep enough with the cacao medicine in order to get the deep healing that she can give. It needs to be within that respect within the cacao, and that energy of cacao remains throughout the growing and the harvesting and the processing, turned into the liqueur, which is the beans that are ground down into a liquid, and then sent. So ceremonial cacao is a real, I would say, the highest grade of cacao you can get, not because it's machined in a certain way, but because for the love of the spirit, for the love of the cacao, for the love of the medicine, and for the love of that plant medicine. And when you do it like that, the cacao can really work her magic during ceremony. So I get my cacao from the Ashaninka tribes of the Peruvian Amazon. They live in the lower part of the tribes. Actually, they spill out from Peru into Brazil, and there's a big Brazilian Ashaninka tribe. In the Peruvian side, they have a lot of problems because there's a lot of illegal logging going on there, and there's illegal coca growing, and one of the only incomes that these tribes, the Ashaninka tribes, have is the cacao. And by selling it to us, and I work with a partner, Forever Cacao, and Pablo makes it into chocolate and also works with it ceremonially, and myself, we buy direct from the tribes, and so the money goes direct to them. And by buying them and giving them a very fair price, and a very fair price to help them ship it out of the Amazon, which is a 3-day journey, and into Cusco. So it's a huge mission, and also have it processed in the Amazon by the communities as well. It stops them from having to grow coca for cocaine, and also helps them to fight the logging companies that are coming in. It also gives them autonomy and sovereignty over the land that they have by giving them an income on producing cacao. And originally they used to live on the land, they used to be harmonized with the land, they make their own cloths and their own clothes and their own textiles from the Amazon. But now, as more and more infiltration of the West has come in and the Amazon is diminishing at a massive rate, these Ashaninka tribes are really very susceptible to a lot of influx by buyers that don't really care for them, by illegal loggers and poachers. And so by buying the cacao from them, we give them an income and we give them a sense of purpose, and they utilize the cacao trees that naturally grow in the Amazon. One of the questions, ceremonial cacao must be raw. Well, it varies. That is all dependent. I wouldn't say so. Keith's cacao is not raw. He's the cacao shaman from Guatemala, and his cacao is beautifully ceremonial because of his love and respect for the plant medicine. Like I said, he lightly toasts his cacao and shells it. The cacao we use with the Ashaninka is raw. We do not toast it, but the principle is the same. It's the love of the plant medicine. It's the intention of which the cacao is being made. It's the love that the people have for making the cacao and working with it, without seeing cacao as a commodity that needs to be bought and sold or for profit. So when the intention and the energy is right, I don't think it really matters whether it's raw or roasted, as long as the intention and the love for the plant medicine is there. Cacao is amazing for people with ME. It's a muscle relaxant, but more so it can dive in deep and actually hear some of the messages that might be going on behind the ME. It gives you time for integration in a ceremony, so you really do go into the silence and really hear some of the inner intuition and messages. It also gives advice on how you can best deal with certain illnesses or diseases that you might have. And again, it's very, very gentle. The only time cacao it has difficulties is with people with antidepressants. So if you're taking SSRIs, the antidepressants, you are naturally, the chemical, the SSRI, is releasing serotonin chemically into the brain in order for you to feel better. Now, cacao naturally boosts the serotonin levels. So if you've taken an SSRI and then you take cacao, you're having a double boost of serotonin and dopamine flooding your brain. And so this can lead to quite hard migraines, especially if you're susceptible to migraines. So what we suggest for people who are on SSRIs is just to take a little bit of cacao. Even if you take a little bit of cacao, you are ingesting the cacao medicine, and that cacao medicine can have a deep effect still, especially when we do it in a group, in a ceremony, because then you really get the full effects of the energy of everybody, and so it can be just as powerful. However, if you are taking SSRIs, I wouldn't suggest taking cacao on a regular basis until you start lowering your dose of SSRIs or coming off. And I have seen people come off SSRIs by using cacao. They've come on ceremonies and the cacao has spoken to them and helped them find a way through their depression and their anxiety. And some people have actually come off antidepressants with SSRIs. Yeah, is it okay to use maca powder with cacao? You can mix cacao with anything. In fact, here is a beautiful, this is my smoothie, my morning smoothie, and I don't like complicated drinks. I quite like things with not very many ingredients in it. So this is what I found, amazing smoothie that kind of gives me everything I need. And it's coconut water with organic banana. So coconut water with an organic banana, maca, hemp seed, and cacao. And the hemp seed gives you all your omegas 3, 6, and 9s, your essential fatty acids, your amino acids, high in protein, calcium, and a shelled hemp seed. And I obviously take my shelled hemp seed from the hemp that we grow in, organic hemp that we grow in Reading. Cacao gives me my magnesium, the energy boost, makes me feel happy and relaxed and more able to cope with everyday life. The banana gives me again that magnesium, that energy, and also has it also helps to release some of that anandamide. And then the coconut water is a good mixer. And then if I want to sweeten it, I put a little bit of maple syrup in that for sweetening. So I sweeten with maple syrup. I don't have any sugar in my diet. I don't do sugar. So maple syrup is always a very good alternative for me because I don't really like honey either. The Cacao ceremonies I've participated in have all been chock full of music, which I found distracting. Do you have any advice on showing cacao in silence, please? I've just shared her in 2 women's circles recently, but not super confident to do it on my own. Well, yeah, yes, it is. Many people use cacao in dance in many different ways, but I think that it's in the silence that you can really hear the inner wisdom. And when there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of distraction all the time, and it's very hard to be in silence and dive deep. But if you do want to work with cacao in that way. She works brilliantly in that way in order to guide people and help people to listen and hear what she has to say. And it's in that silence that you can really hear her. She's very subtle. She'll take you to the water, but I'll take you to the water, but she won't make you drink. You have to drink the nectar of cacao yourself. And that's why she's so powerful, because actually in ayahuasca, doesn't matter where you're at, you're going to get thrown into the deep end. She's the crone ayahuasca. She's really the old wisdom keeper, and wherever you are and whoever you are, you're going to have an experience with ayahuasca. But cacao is very different. She's like the maiden. She's very soft and gentle. So you have to meet her halfway. And so in the silence, you can really hear her and really get her messages. So for me, it's very important to be able to do that and offer it in that way. Not everyone will do it differently, but for me, that's the way I feel you can get the most benefit of hearing the wisdom of cacao in that deep silence. Can cacao affect your heart rate? Well, it has caffeine in it, not as much as coffee, but it does contain some caffeine. But on the whole, I find that it doesn't. It's not like a big rise and then drop. Some people do feel like they've their heart race a little bit, but then I find out usually that they've drunk a coffee before they've come to a cacao ceremony, and then they drink cacao, so that's just too much stimulation. It is a stimulant, but it's a very gentle stimulant, and it's a very natural stimulant. It's not so hardcore as coffee is. So it's definitely a brilliant alternative to coffee. So I sell ceremonial cacao from the Ashaninka. Keith also sells ceremonial cacao from Guatemala. At the end, it's all on my website, cacaoceremonies.co.uk. On that website, there's all information about my cacao ceremonies, about the cacao and where we get it from, and where to buy it from, and we do ship all over. I don't really know anywhere else that is doing ceremonial grade cacao. That's the only two people I know. That's why I secured a connection with the Ashaninka, so that I would always be able to use ceremonial grade cacao, so I could get the most out of the medicine. Is there a specific type of variety of cacao that you use for ceremony, or is any cacao from the supermarket suffice? Well, like I've already said, no. But also, depending on where you are in the world is where the varieties are. So if you're in St. Lucia, there's different varieties growing there than there is in Peru. So the variety doesn't actually matter. What really matters is how it's produced and why it's produced. I offer breathwork circles, and we're interested in finding out about how best to offer cacao before those sessions. Well, I would be a little bit careful, because when you're using breathwork, you are actually hyper ventilating the body, and on top of cacao, because it is a stimulant, you might find that it could be overwhelmingly intense. The consequences of breathwork and cacao. I don't know if personally if I would do breathwork and cacao. That's my own personal decision. Having worked with cacao for many years, I think breathwork is breathwork and needs to be done. And then maybe afterwards, I certainly wouldn't do it before a breathwork session. Maybe afterwards, maybe in the afternoon or something, using cacao to integrate the breathwork session. But I wouldn't do it with breathwork, and I wouldn't do it before a breathwork session. I would certainly do it afterwards as an integration process for people to go deep and really hear some of the messages that went on. As I said, if cacao can trigger migraines, yes, it can, especially if you're SSRIs, and if you are susceptible to migraines, it does have the ability to trigger migraines. You need to drink a lot of water. It's very, very dehydrating. And as I said, it's medicine, so it works differently for everyone. And some people do get migraines from it and headaches from it. But again, you can come to ceremony and only drink a little bit, which wouldn't trigger a migraine or a headache, and still get the benefits of being within a group environment and in a group atmosphere. And it is really amazing. It's almost like the cacao, once everyone's interconnected with each other, she really works on everybody in the same way. So it's really not the quantity you drink of cacao. It's really just coming and being in that spirit of service to the cacao and being open and ready to receive her messages and letting that happen naturally. Then the messages can come. So I always say to people, you don't have to drink the whole cup. It really isn't about quantity. It's about that kind of open-heartedness to receive the cacao goddess within. And then she just seems to work, and naturally she is really amazing. And a lot of people do drink the whole cup because their body is craving it. It's really brilliant medicine for women. It's great if you're premenstrual. It's great if you're menstruating, and it's great if you're menstrual. It really releases a lot of the cramps. It has very high in iron and proteins, and it really kind of seems to calm the system down, especially if you suffer from quite hard periods and it can really dip you emotionally. Then cacao is a brilliant medicine to take during this time. If you have high blood pressure, and a kind of a weak heart, again, I would suggest you could do cacao in smoothie. If you take like a smoothie, when I talk about in a smoothie, I'd say about 25 grams of cacao in the smoothie, 20 grams. If you're doing a cacao ceremony of 42 grams, that's a shamanic dose. That's a lot of cacao, 42 grams. So yes, if you've got a heart murmur or you've got a high blood pressure, I personally wouldn't take that much. But even if you took 25 grams or 20 grams, it's going to be enough to help you reach that place to meet the cacao spirit and really get the messages that you need. Again, this webinar is about how cacao opens us up consciously and helps us reconnect back into nature and harmonize ourselves. And this is what the cacao told me, is that what's happening is that we're in so much fear and depression and anxiety that we don't know how to think clearly. We're not really aware of the reality of what's going on. There's a lot of smokes and mirrors, and what cacao can do is reharmonize us and bring us back into balance, release old blockages and old echoes that are keeping us stuck, and really give us some clarity so that we can start thinking much more clearly again by opening up the heart and loving ourselves more. And when we love ourselves more, we just have so much more gratitude and so much more compassion, and most of all, so much more empathy for others. And what's lacking on this planet right now is a real deep sense of empathy. And what cacao does is, I think, really open us up to loving ourselves and becoming empathic towards ourselves. When we start becoming empathic towards ourselves, we can then become empathic to everybody else. And if we're not empathic and loving ourselves, then very often we can't be empathic to anybody else around us. And very often we treat ourselves worse than we treat anybody else. And we will treat our loved ones like we treat ourselves. And so cacao is a really beautiful medicine to dive deep in for our own journeys of self-transformation and consciousness, in order to become more in love with ourselves and understand ourselves better. And with that understanding, then our empathy and gratitude really grows. What would you say is the best way to give gratitude to the cacao spirit? I think it's about loving yourself. The more you love yourself, and also to take what she tells us and actually put it into action. So what I'm seeing is a lot of people going to this workshop or that workshop or this ayahuasca ceremony or that ceremony, and actually not doing the inner work that it takes to make the changes. And I definitely find that with ayahuasca, that it's so big, it's very hard to tangibly make those changes. But with cacao, she gives you really tangible changes to make. And I have people writing to me 6 months later or 4 months later saying that they're still vegetarian, or that they meditate every morning, or they've taken up yoga, or they have more hot baths, they walk more barefoot in nature, little things. But those little things make big, big changes in the long run. That turning vegetarian is making a massive change on the planet. Doing meditation every morning or having a daily practice, it's going to have a massive impact on your daily mood and how you relate and how you can cope with the stresses and strains of living. So it's taking what cacao tells us and actually tangibly changing them in our lives and being the change and realizing the power of and the power of cacao. So I'm sensitive to caffeine and find that taking it after 6 p.m. keeps me awake in the early hours. I've recognized it's best to use for in the morning. What are your thoughts? Yeah, I do my cacaos in the afternoon because of that, actually. My cacao ceremonies are 12:30 to 5 p.m. and I do all my cacao ceremonies in the day. Very rarely do them at night. But when I do them at night, some people do get wired and stay up. Others have the best night's sleep ever. It really is medicine. It really just depends on how you relate to the caffeine, how you relate to the medicine. But I tend to do them in the afternoon because of that. And also people still stay awake sometimes. But I find that it actually gives people some chance to kind of come down from the ceremony and be able to have a few hours before they have to go to sleep. So on the other side of it, hot chocolate as a nighttime drink is often prescribed, so it can work the other way. And I have done a few evening cacao ceremonies where people have said that they slept really well. Would you recommend training before holding a cacao ceremony? Well, if you're a dance teacher or a yoga teacher or a meditation teacher and you do cacao with it, with the spirit and the understanding of cacao, then I don't think it's a problem. But if you want to take someone into a deep journey using cacao, I think it really helps to have had some training in plant medicines, to have had some training in knowing how to speak and work with the plant medicine, because I've had some very deep things happening in my ceremonies, and I've had entities being released in ceremony. I've seen some huge things, even bigger than in ayahuasca, actually. And if you're not trained properly, then it can be very, very, you wouldn't know what to do and how to deal with it. So I certainly would, if you're interested in doing a training, I offer a Cacaoista training in April of next year, where I train people to actually be able to go out and take cacao ceremonies in the way that I run them, which is communing with the plant medicine and connecting with the plant medicine. But the training isn't just connected to cacao, even though we work with cacao. It's about really, it's an immersion into plant consciousness and really connecting in with plant consciousness and seeing how we can use plant consciousness to help shift our consciousness. I'd like to say one more thing about cacao, which I forgot to mention at the beginning, is that cacao is the last legal plant medicine that we can drink that is shifting consciousness. So the government, with the anti-psychotic bill, has now banned every single plant medicine, everything on this, everything that we could possibly take to shift our consciousness is now banned and has been made illegal. So there's a real, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there's a real issue going on here now over our sovereignty, over our real conscious well-being, because we have always ingested plants for our well-being. We have always ingested plants for our conscious evolution. And it's almost like cacao is the last plant medicine standing. And of course, they won't ever ban cacao because she's chocolate, just like they'll never ban alcohol because it's so entrenched. So fortunately, because of that, I can openly be a plant medicine shaman here in the UK using cacao as my medicine. And people think, oh, cacao, what can cacao do? But cacao can be more profound than ayahuasca. It really can be. Don't underestimate the power of cacao. Like I said at the beginning of this talk, she is a very, very powerful plant medicine. She is called theobromine, food of the gods, and she was used in ceremony by the Aztecs and the Mayans. She was used as currency. She's in all our creation myths. She is a hell of a plant medicine, and a powerful one at that. And it's a really amazing opportunity now to be able to utilize cacao in the ways that she always was in the ancient times, which is as a plant to shift consciousness and taking her out of this very kind of confectionery chocolate bastardization of the medicine, and really bringing her into her full glory as a ceremonial plant medicine. She is really a special a plant medicine, and like I said, the only one that's left legal. So we can legally do this, and it's so important that we find humans, especially in the urban jungles of the world, find time for integration. We are so bombarded with pressure from our families, from work, from life, from politics, from all areas, that we've almost we're almost firefighting the whole time, and we never give ourselves time to just stop and be and integrate. And a cacao ceremony is a very powerful ceremony in order to just stop and integrate and listen and hear what's going on in the deep silence within, using the cacao goddess, the cacao spirit, to reconnect you back to yourself. And we always used to sit in ceremony in the ancient times. People always came together, communities, in ceremony to honor the moon, to honor the sun, to honor the stars. And we've really lost touch with that connection with nature, with that connection with the world around us, with the natural world around us. And what cacao can do is give us that space to reconnect back to our true nature, which is love, our true nature, which is oneness and wholeness, and our true nature, which is connectedness to all. And that's why I call my cacao ceremonies, because this is about sharing, connecting, being and helping and supporting each other on our journeys. And with a loving, heart-opening medicine that is cacao, it's a really powerful opportunity to actually really experience that. Old, ancient community, tribal gatherings where we would drink plant medicine, drink cacao, and really journey and connect with the gods, the food of the gods. So if there isn't any other questions, or if anything I've missed, I do regular cacao ceremonies in London. I do them on a Saturday afternoon. All the information is cacaoceremonies.co.uk. I'm going up to Manchester and Liverpool on the 29th and 30th of July, up north, for those who want to do it. I'm also doing a Cacaoista training in Ibiza in April the 9th to the 18th. The 10th to the 17th. And why I choose Ibiza is because this is a full-on cacao retreat and training. So it takes us out of our daily lives and immerses us into plant consciousness, into plant medicines. And if you could go on my website, RebeccaShaman.com, there's a lot of information about it, a little video of what happened last year at the Cacaoista training. It's incredibly powerful. And what it does more than anything, cacao, is it transforms ourselves. It really transforms ourselves by opening up our hearts. And when we transform ourselves, that's when we transform the world. And that's why cacao is a really important plant medicine for now, as a heart-opening medicine, because when each one of us transforms ourselves, then the world itself will transform. When we transform the inside, the external, the outside immediately changes. So I thank you so much for joining me. All the information on my Manchester and Liverpool cacao ceremonies will be up on my website in the next couple of days. Any information on my cacao, and if you'd like to buy cacao, is at cacaoceremonies.co.uk. We sell, like I said, the Ashaninka cacao, and I hopefully will be going out there in October to meet the tribes and bring back some more photos and connection with that tribe, so that you can really see where the money is going to and how we're helping tribal communities find their autonomy and sovereignty. So thank you again for joining me on this webinar. My next webinar is in 2 weeks' time. and it's on Hemp Can Save the Planet. Hemp Can Save the World. This is going to be purely on hemp. And if you auto subscribe, you will get automatic updates on that. I'm going to talk about the power of hemp and how important hemp is for the future and for our future generations, and how we need to move to a plant-based economy in order to be sustainable and leave our planet clean and healthy for future generations. So please do tune into that. I think that's on the 6th of June. And I look forward to connecting with you then. Have a wonderful evening, and thanks very much for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Take care and have a great night.